Shalom, Shalom. I'm Rabbi Yehudah, and today I'd like to talk to you about the complexion of Israel. That's right, something controversial, and I think something that needed to be addressed. So, without further ado, let's talk a little bit about the complexion of Israel. Now, often I've heard a few groups, whether they're cult systems, I don't know if you call themselves Hebrew Israelites, Israel, Jews, whatever, debating on the complexion of Israel. This has much to do with the fact that when there is a discussion about the history of Israel, which is mostly theoretical in nature, is always something to do with racism, white supremacy, or the other side, or some people would call the reverse racism. Now, racism, white supremacy is not isolated in other areas of human life and activities. Actually, racism, white supremacy, its tentacles is far-reaching even within the institution of Judaism. Unfortunately, it's never a positive thing. It victimizes people who have been classified as non-whites, and it also empowers people who have been classified as white, but the effect of it is injustice. In other words, it is a wicked system. Nonetheless, it also breeds ill will and prejudice of evil intention towards one and the other. Now, Israel is supposed to be beyond and above this. When I say Israel in this context, I'm meaning Jews and those who call themselves Israel. The Torah is above and beyond skin complexion or classification of people because of their complexion. As a matter of fact, we learned in the Torah that Israel came out as a mixed multitude from Mizraim being born as a nation. But I'm jumping the gun a little bit. This is the reason why, when it comes to historical context, many people are offended when there are different theories about the complex or the complexion of Israel in ancient times. Nonetheless, I am a proponent, one who believes that the phenotypes of ancient Israelites from the time of Yaakov Avinu, Jacob our father, existed were more consistent with those of Africans. And the reason that is because of the geographical location and the demographics of people living during the time. And archaeologists, anthropologists have discovered different clay murals and depictions of the Canaanites and the ancient Israelites during that time, having the phenotype features of Africans. Thick lips, wide nose, and if you don't want to say kiki hair, you can at least say they had tightly curled hair. But I'm not even just relying on the archaeological and the anthropological discoveries. I'm also relying upon the sages of Israel, those who are of high caliber, written about in Talmud and even in the Mishnah. One of the individuals I'd like to bring forth is an individual named Eliezer ben Hyrcanus. Eliezer ben Hyrcanus actually lived during the time the Second Temple was standing. He is purported to be the son or descendant of the priesthood. He was a Cohen. And even in the Mishnah, it is spoken of the fact that his wisdom, being a great rabbi, great authoritarian figure, his wisdom, if you were to make it palpable, and in this illustration, put it on a scale, and put his wisdom on a scale versus all of the other sages of Israel, on the other, they said that his wisdom will outweigh them all. And this is found in the Pirkei Avot, of the sayings of our forefathers. This is a Mishnah text. Nonetheless, this individual, according to the legend of Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, found in the book called Pirkei de Eliezer, the legends of Eliezer, speaking of this individual, he states, it is purported that he stated, that Shem and Ham were both blessed and they were both black. And he used the word in Hebrew, shachorim, which is plural for shachor. But it depends on which volume that you have, because in some volumes the word shachor is singular, and in others the word shachorim is used. Nonetheless, both words are the same. The difference being that one is singular and the other one is plural. If we understand that, then you have to understand he called both Shem and Ham black. Now, of course, he was speaking in the context in a time where the Israelites, Yaakov Avinu, did not exist yet. Although some may argue that he was, but we at least know that he was speaking more accurately of the time during the First Temple period. But we have other sages. In the Mishnah, we have Rabbi Ishmael, and the Mishnah Negaim, and then this is very important because Negaim means means contact, and it has everything to do with leprosy and different complexions of leprosy and the different shades, mentioning different eggshells that were used as a reference for the different types of leprosy, which is very interesting as well. They're basically demonstrating that leprosy was an issue for people who had a dark complexion. Nonetheless, though, Rabbi Ishmael, who lived in the Second Temple period, also stated that Israel is neither black or white, but shades in between them, referring the complexion of Israel as to a boxwood tree. Now, if anybody knows what a boxwood tree is, it's basically a species of evergreen, from the bonsai tree to what people call the Xmas tree. But if you look at those, there are different shades of brown and beige. So we know at least during the Second Temple period, the complexion of Israel was the complexion of different shades of brown. Furthermore, in the Talmud Bavli, we see in Masechta Bechorot 45b, Resh Lakish, another main figure in the Talmud, stating that Israel should not marry the same complexion, in other words, of the extreme complexion, that a very extreme white complexion person in Israel should not marry the same or something close to extreme white complexion person, and a very, very dark complexion person of Israel should not marry an equally completely dark. In other words, they should marry those complexion, or preferably by him, those complexion that were the opposite, to maintain what he called the median complexion of Israel. So what do we learn by the testimony of Rabbi Ishmael and Resh Lakish? What we learn is that even 2,000 years ago, Israel were a multitude of variation of complexion. Therefore, at least by the Second Temple period, Israel looked, as far as complexions, like many people around the world. Yes, you can argue this was due to conversions and people joined themselves into Israel. And this is a factor to consider. But for those of you who have an objection to this, you have to understand that conversion into Judaism was not a new phenomenon 2,000 years ago. It was a phenomenon going back 3,500 years ago. And if you understand that, then you have to understand that Israel left Egypt not only a mixed multitude, but an amalgamation of people who joined themselves to Israel. Let's do the math. When Yaakov Avinu, or Jacob our forefather, went into Egypt, they went into Egypt as 70 souls. But when it left 210 years later, out from the land of Egypt, they left as a count of 600,000 men alone. Israel came out as a speckled bird, if you may, a group of people, amalgamation and assimilation of people who joined themselves to Israel. So Israel was born a nation of people that came from even the Hamites. Why? Because the geographical location of Egypt is in the land of North Africa. Now some of you say, yeah, the North Africans were of a lighter complexion, and therefore Israel left as a lighter complexion. It doesn't matter to me what argument you might make. You can't have it both ways. You can't say the Egyptians were Hamites and the Hamites were black, and then say that the Egyptians were a lighter complexion. And for those of you who are proponents of this pro-black, dark-skinned Israelite theory, you can't make this statement that at least 2,000 years ago, when the temple was standing, that the Israelites were all black complexion people. Now, there's another historical factor I must throw in. Let's say that, just for the sake of argument, that an Israelite, and now excuse me for this illustration, this might offend some of you, that an Israelite was blacker than 1,000 midnights, who went into the land of Ireland and had a son, and his son married an Irish woman that was rosy white. And this repeated itself. He had a son that married an Irish woman's rosy white, and then they married, and let's say like 3 or 6 generations down, this repeated itself. What complexion do you think this great-great-great-great-grandson will be? Of course, he will look like the Irish people. Now, the reason why I brought this up, because we know, this is a historical fact, 2,000 years ago, when the temple was destroyed, the second temple was destroyed, Israel was scattered throughout the 4 corners of the earth. And whenever you have a smaller group of people assimilating to a greater group of people, through marriage, they will look like the people of that geographical location of which they have been expelled to, or with which they have decided to settle down to. And this is very important because now we realize that Israel, being scattered throughout the 4 corners of the earth, will look like everybody they assimilated to. And this is the reason why we have Iraqi Jews, Persian Jews, Ethiopian Jews. We have German Jews called the Ashkenazi Jews. We have Jews that look like everybody on the face of the earth. Now, we know psychologically, if someone was in distress, just one other analogy for the sake of the argument. If you broke down in the middle of the road and you looked in the distance and you saw a group of Asians around the house, or you saw a group of African Americans, one may presume, or you see a group of white people in the distance and your cell phone was dead and you needed to use the phone, and you had to go there to one of those houses, which house would you go to? And I guarantee you, the majority of you will say to the house that of the people that you are more familiar with. And this is just basic, practical human psychology. We are more comfortable with the people that we're familiar with. And so, being that that is the case, Israel today, being scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, are in a better position to be a light unto the nations than any other group of people in the world. Because Israel looked like everyone around the earth. You have Filipino Jews, you have West African Jews, those that, the group of people that I represent, and you have Caribbean Jews, you name it. We all look like the people that we were scattered into. So, the Most High in His great wisdom scattered us throughout the four corners of the earth to fulfill multiple purposes. One, the punishment that was due to us for our disobedience. Second, to win proselytes among the nations. And third, to be a light unto the nations, to teach the nations about the beautiful and glorious doctrine of the Torah and of the Creator. This was a genius move of the Most High. So now that you got your answer about the complexion of Israel, Israel looks like everybody. You can't look at an individual, you can't look at an individual and basically say, that's a Jew and that's not a Jew. It's impossible. Israel is known by the observance of Torah. Israel is known by the observance of the Masorah. It is not enough for you to be the seed of Israel. You also have to be compliant to the Torah. And the Masorah, which is the traditions that were given to us by the judges of Israel. That is the institution that the Most High has created through Moshe Rabbeinu. Allahu Shalom, uverakha. So, I hope you enjoy this. If you have any further questions, feel free to contact us. And we will try to address any questions or any suggestions of any content that you might feel that we need to address. Just hit the subscribe button below, and we wish you a Shalom uverakha.
Amona